Welcome to zrok Office Hours. This is a little preview of some new permission functionality that's available in the upcoming release of zrok, which will be 4.26. Um, Probably the easiest way to get into this is just to show you what's involved. So this is my local development environment. So let's, in my usual fashion, let's go ahead and run my zrok controller. Oh, am I on a bad branch or something? Yeah, we need to be on the right branch. Try to start my controller and it hit a migration that is forward of what's in main. So that should fix it up. So run my zrok controller. And then here I'm going to run my metrics bridge. And I'm going to run my public front end. And then here I'm going to go ahead and run a web console development mode. So let's go ahead and in my environment, I'm logged in as my normal account. Let's go ahead and make another user. So we'll do zrok invite. And then let's just call it user@somewhere.com. And my local development environment is not set up to send emails or do any of those sorts of things. Like when I need to work on that, I can set it up to test that. But for development purposes, I don't need to actually send emails. So what I can do is I can grab the registration token out of the controller log and I can log out of here. And then I can use the register endpoint to set a password for that account. And I'm just going to go ahead and use my existing password. And then let's log into that. So it's user. And then we'll change the username to user@somewhere.com. And then we'll grab the enable token, the account token. We'll do, so there's a little trick. So when you're running on Linux, normally I'm already enabled, right? So I do zrok status. This environment's already enabled, and it's enabled with my normal michael@quigley.com account. And I need to run multiple zrok users to show off this feature. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say home equals temp zrok, and then I'm going to say zrok enable with the new account token. If I don't do that, zrok will complain that the account's already enabled, right? You already have an enabled environment. Disable first before you can enable again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say home equals temp zrok and point to the home directory at a different location. And now, oh, I've got to configure it because it's a brand new environment. So first we got to do zrok config set API endpoint. All right. And then we can do our enable. All right. So here we are, user@somewhere.com, all enabled in this directory. So any zrok command I preface with home equals this directory will use the other enabled environment. If I drop the home variable, it will use my default home variable. So I'm going to go ahead and log out and log back in as my normal account, right? And what I'm going to do is show you a basic private share, right? So I do a zrok private, share private, headless, backend mode web, share the current directory. It offers a command that allows any zrok user on that service instance to access that account. So if I access it with my own account, you can see over here that I'm accessing it as you'd expect from the same account. If I add that home equals temp zrok, it's accessing it from my other account. So it's accessing it from the user@somewhere.com account. So that works with any accounts on the same zrok instance. So with 4.26, there's a new mode where you can basically say closed. So if you add the closed flag, and let's just do help closed, enable closed permission mode, see access grant. Zrok accounts that are allowed to use this share. It looks like there's a typo. I should fix that. And we will fix that. Let's fix that right now, in fact, that are allowed. That should be fixed. So if we come over here and we go, that's in the CLI stuff. That would be in share private. That are allowed. Make sure that share public is correct. I'm pretty sure I copy pasted some of that stuff. So, yep, it's wrong there too. And it's probably wrong on reserve also. So we'll fix that. Yep, area. All right. So if we just do a go install again. And we run our share private again. Now it's fixed. So we'll commit that before we merge this PR. So yeah, there's a new flag called closed. And what happens when you run closed, so I say same command as before, but just adding closed to it. If I try and access it from my own account, that will work fine, right? I can access that from my own account. If I try and access it from the other account or from my other zrok user, it's now going to have unauthorized. So that's now, even if I know the token, if it's reserved, it's just not going to work. There's a new permission mode that prevents that. So what we can do is we can say access grant user at somewhere.com. And now when I do that, oh, it's a new share. Duh. Now that user at somewhere.com, because I used home equals my temp zrok, now that user's allowed to access it. So there's also, let's say that I went ahead and I did this, and then I realized, I've got a reserve share, or I've got, an ephemeral share that I don't want to lose the identity of. I want to keep it running, but I forgot to add an access grant. There's a new command, zrok modify share, and it takes a share token and it has a set of flags, add access grant and remove access grant. There's not currently, as of 426, a way to list the access grants. That's coming probably in 427. You'll have to just sort of guess. This is a sort of a pre-release of this feature. It's a limitation, but we'll have a fix for it fairly soon. I want to actually revise the web console a little bit so that the web console has some way of enumerating some of this data, and then a CLI command that'll let you interrogate this stuff a little bit. So I've got a share. I didn't add an access grant to it. All I've got to do is do a zrok modify share, add access grant user at somewhere.com, right? And now if I grab this token, I try to access that, it works. If I change that to a remove access grant, and now I try and access it, it doesn't work. So you can easily add and remove users at any point with a closed permission mode share, and then that user can either access it or not. So what's going on behind the scenes is now, by default, previously, zrok, if the user trying to do the access knew the token, it would go ahead and create the policies in OpenZD that would allow it to connect over the overlay to the other user. Now there's a permission check. So there's a new table in the database called access grants. So if we do SQLite 3, select star, let's just do schema access grants, right? There's a new table that basically links a share to an account. And that's a new permission check. So if the share itself is set to the closed permission mode, then the zrok controller will actually check and make sure that there's appropriate permissions granted for the user that's trying to access the share. And currently, the account that owns the share is always allowed to access the share. We'll probably be adding more rich and more nuanced permission models in the future. Like we'll end up with groups, and we'll have default sets of users that you want to use as permission groups, things like that. We'll explore some of that stuff as we go forward. But for now, like if you want to create a private share and you want to lock it down so that only your account can use it, just -- closed and you're done. Just another layer of security around some of this stuff. And then you can obviously let other people that you trust use them as well. So that's basically the permission mode stuff. So let's go ahead while we're doing stuff, because this is an office hours video and we just kind of do stuff. And this is a fairly short one. Let's go ahead and commit this and merge it. So if we do look at I always like to make sure I know what I'm committing before I commit stuff. So I kind of always like to do a little bit of a diff just to see if I'm actually committing what I think I am. And this is literally just a typo. All right, so it's just those messages. And I always tag my commits with the issue number for the issue that describes the feature or the enhancement or whatever. So we'll do that. And then we'll push it. And let's go ahead and merge this PR while we're at it. So this is the PR for the feature. Take a quick look at what's in it, just so you can kind of get an idea of how it was built. Updated the change log. The CLI had to change a little bit because I added a new modify command. So there's a new parent modify for modify share, which the implementation of this is really straightforward. All the command does is normal SDK stuff. It loads the root, creates a client for the API, and then does a update share request and passes in whatever add access grants or remove access grants are specified on the CLI. And you can mix and match those on the command line. You can add multiple users at a shot. You can, same holds true for the share command. You can do -- access grant multiple times and specify multiple users on one CLI. All that stuff works fine. So that's the CLI, the modify share command. I had to update reserve, share private and share public. Those now have some additional wiring that plumb up the new access grant and the permission mode stuff. The access command, the access handler in the controller was updated so that if the share's permission mode is closed, then it has to do appropriate check access grants. And check access grants is literally if the ID of the user requesting access is the owner of the share, then they're allowed to access it. Otherwise, it does a database query against that access grants table to see if that user that's requesting the access has permission to do that or not. And if it does, then it returns true or returns no error. Otherwise, if there is no grants and it's not the owner, then they're not allowed to access it. It's that simple. That's really kind of the bulk of the controller logic that had to change for this. There's some new stuff in the share. When we actually create the share, we actually record the additional metadata, so the permission mode stuff is set. We actually store the list of access grants and all that sort of stuff. Store those, create access grant. The SQL stuff is relatively straightforward. If you look at Postgres, all we had to do was add a new column called permission mode, or a new enum called permission mode type, and a new column on the shares table that's the permission mode, and it defaults to open. So the behavior, if you don't specify anything in the SDK or on the CLI, if you don't specify -- close, the behaviors act like the way it's always acted. So it's up to the user. And again, that's probably stay that way for a while. It'll probably definitely stay that way until the feature's fully baked and that we've got the ability to list the access grants, some of that sort of stuff. Let's see. The rest of it's relatively straightforward. When we delete the share in the controller, we make sure we delete whatever access grants are created for it just to keep things tidy. Added a new guide for this. On the docs website, there's a new doc page that describes how the feature works. It's linked in the change log. Should be pretty easy to find. The SDK had to change, so now there's a permission mode and access grants in the share request. And that's how you, from the SDK, the CLI tools use the same SDK. That's how you specify the permission mode you're looking for. The API spec changed a tiny bit in that the share request grew to include the permission mode and access grants. And I added a new return type to or HTTP status code to the update share handler so that it can return a bad request if you specify an invalid email address. But that's basically it. There really wasn't much to the feature. It's pretty straightforward because, again, all that's happening behind the scenes is when the user is requesting access to a share, if it's granted, the controller is just creating a dial policy for that user's identity for that share. That's all it's doing. And then the SDK, the ZD SDK in that client then just connects to it. It's pretty straightforward. The overlay provides a lot of those primitives and makes this really easy. So ZD's doing a lot of the heavy lifting there. But yeah, let's go ahead and merge this because that's good to go. Scroll all the way to the top. It's already been approved. buddy Paul approved it for me, so let's just merge it. And we'll say number 432, which is Zrok permission model. Confirm. So that feature will be going out in the next release, which will be 4.26. So anyways, that's a preview of some of the permission stuff. I'm still working on pulling the material together for the 0.5 series sort of overview, architectural overview video. That should be coming at some point here. I'm not going to promise exactly when, but it's in the works. So, but yeah, thanks so much for your interest in Zrok and watching these videos. Appreciate it. We'll catch you in the next one. Have a good one.